Hello there, Gamerinos and Gamerinas. Welcome to UnicornStorm. This is Rady, and today's game is a bit different than usual. It's my own game. This is Field of Stars, a space travel action shooter exploration resource gathering side-scrolling game for the Game Boy. Well, in the style of Game Boy games. This game was originally supposed to be entered into the Game Boy Game Jam over on itch.io back in September of 2023. Now, the way these game jams work is that you have a limited and also rather short amount of time to create a game from scratch. Sometimes you're allowed to use pre-created open source resources like sprite work, music and the like, and sometimes, like in this jam's case, you're not allowed to. The main rules have been released long before the game jam started, so I knew that the finished game had to adhere to some of the Game Boy's limitations, like screen resolution and the color palette, but you were allowed to include more varied music, though it was still highly recommended to use more faithful chiptunes. The day the game jam started, they announced the main theme you had to include, and it was the most boring theme for any video game ever. So much that it at first turned me off the whole idea to participate in this. It was space. Because the 8-bit era hasn't been riddled with space shooters. To be fair, there were some unique ideas and concepts floating around to interpret the space theme. For example, organizing limited space or making space. So it wasn't as restrictive as I initially assumed. So I made a space shooter. Now, I am so not a programmer. I'm still learning to code, and these little games I make are more an exercise so that I may someday be able to create something actually well made. But all this is more of an hobby. My code is messy and inefficient, it all barely holds together, and when something goes wrong, and it often does, I take way too long to A. spot the mistake and B. find a solution. Through a lot of trial and error. But in the end it all accumulated into an actual game, my biggest one yet, with a start and a finish. And something akin to a story, light as it is. And progression and saving. And yeah, I couldn't make the deadline. I even thought about axing some of the features, simplifying some, but more and more issues were still popping up left and right. So to keep my sanity, the little bit I have of it, I had to accept that I just couldn't finish this game in time. So I turned it down a few gears. I still wanted to complete this project, just not with a strict deadline looming over me the whole time. I kept all the features in, I even added a few. And now it's done. It's ready to play. You can download it right now. So what is this game? Well, I already mentioned that the space theme didn't really speak to me at the time, but this jam was also around the time Starfield released, so I thought, hey, let's make this a kind of what-if game, a bit of a spoof or parody. Like, how would modern Bethesda have developed Starfield for the Game Boy? It's not a true demake, it's still its own thing, but let's call it heavily inspired by Starfield. I mean, the name gives it away. The broader concept doesn't even need to be a reference towards Bethesda's space adventure, but I cheekily included an intro level at some point where you delve into a cave and collect a relic. Your goal is to make it to the edge of the galaxy with said relic to wipe out all evil. Classic. Now you can't just fly there. For one, the journey requires a lot of fuel. So for every space you move on the star map, you have to spend 1 unit of fuel, and you don't have the funds to buy that much. And even if you could, the last few worlds are further apart, requiring you to make a larger jump, but your ship's warp drive only allows for single space jumps. You can upgrade the warp drive up to level 3, allowing you to jump to a world 3 spaces away from your current position, but to reach the final level a warp drive of 2 is enough. But there are some advantages to having a level 3 warp drive. But how do you get the better engine? Well, by upgrading your ship, of course, with this state-of-the-art ship building and customization system. Yeah, it's not that complex, but it was never supposed to be. Remember, this is meant to look like a Game Boy game. So you can upgrade your ship's systems, like your weapons to give your shots more oomph, your hull to last longer, your cargo hold to have more storage space for items you need to collect, and of course your warp drive. You can also buy upgrades for your hero, the Star Master. Yeah, you're not just flying through space, you're actually traveling to distant worlds and can land on them and explore a planet's surface. There are more than 16 worlds to land on. It's 17. And you alternate between planet surfaces and space levels. The space levels connect the different worlds with each other, so whenever you travel to a planet, you have to complete one of these. All of them are auto-scrollers, where you have to dodge or destroy all kinds of oncoming stuff. And once you are in orbit over a planet, you can land on it. Some locations are shops for all intents and purposes where you can buy upgrades, but also fuel and upgrade material. Or sell some of your cargo or repair your ship's hull, which is the only way to replenish your ship's HP. The rest of the locations are mostly classic side-scrolling action levels. You can jump and shoot, but also hover with your jetpack by pressing the jump button while in the air. Activating your jetpack does use up some of your oxygen reserves, and you only have a limited amount whenever you step out of your spaceship. Your oxygen is kind of like a timer for the ground worlds. You can explore as long as you have oxygen left in your tank. But as soon as it drops to 0, you instantly teleport back to the ship. But there are also some pickups that drop from enemies to replenish your oxygen and also your health. Some worlds are more dangerous, so your oxygen gets depleted faster, and some have higher or lower gravity, which affects your jumps and jetpack boost. Yeah, more mechanics that got blatantly inspired by Starfield. Planet surfaces have no traditional level goal. You don't have to reach an exit point or something. It's all about exploring and finding the best spots for gathering resources. And that's what the whole game is pretty much all about. Collect a bunch of upgrade materials and credits to improve your ship until you're ready to tackle the final level. There is no order in which you have to visit the different worlds. You don't even have to visit all of them. After a few ship weapon enhancements, the space levels themselves become a reliable farming ground for upgrade materials. You should of course visit every world to discover the most suitable spots to collect resources for your playstyle. Space pirate bases yield more credits, while caves are full of deposits rich with upgrade material, but those are more difficult to traverse. And that's pretty much it. While this is a kind of parody game, I also tried to make it a good game to the best of my ability. So I avoided too tedious mechanics. I mean, yeah, it is about grinding and visiting the same places all the time, since this is how I view Starfield, but you don't have to farm too many resources until you have enough ship upgrades to make it to the end, or maybe concentrate on making enough credits to buy some useful character upgrades, like a stronger blaster, more inventory space, a larger oxygen tank, and of course, additional hit points. Dying also isn't a huge issue, since there is no game over in the game, aside from when the game is over. You only get transported to the last city planet you visited. If you die on a planet's surface, then you won't bring any items you collected there with you. And if your ship gets destroyed in a space level, you also get transported to the last city planet, but you also randomly lose some items in your cargo hold. So there is a bit of punishment. The game also isn't that long. It's hard to really nail down, since my experience with the game is completely different from that of an actual player, but I'd say it would take you about an hour to make it to the end. More if you want to get all the upgrades, less if you get a bit of luck with the item drops. I'm still learning all of this, and there's much to improve. But for now, I'm quite happy with this little project that grew way too big for what it was supposed to be and my abilities. So if you want to give it a try, you can download it for free on itch.io, and feedback is of course highly appreciated. It's about time I experienced this stuff from the other side. So yeah, I hope people get some enjoyment out of this, and of course, I wish you the greatest of days. That's it from Rady. And I so need a break.